Bet the board.
What do you mean you don't bet? I mean, I don't bet. You know, I don't gamble. I don't. I never have, and I never will. Yeah, right. I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
You owe me 15 grand, pal.
Pay him. Pay that man his money.
It's the Bet the Board podcast.
God likes me. He really, really likes me.
In the end, I wound up right back where I started. I could still pick winners, and I could still make money for all kinds of people back home. And why mess up a good thing?
Here's Payne Insider and Todd Furman.
Welcome into the Bet the Board podcast, powered by FanDuel. NFL Week 3. I don't know where the season has gone already with 2 weeks officially in the books. I am your host, Todd Furman, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and co-host, the one, the only Payne Insider.
Not gonna lie, I appreciate you saving me the mud in the face. I thought it was week 2 also.
Well, that's completely fair. I'm just glad to see you recovered from our college football podcast, because I know week over week, that is a monumental undertaking in the Payne Insider household.
Yes, I love that people are tuning in, and we've gotten more emails. When's the college podcast coming back? So we absolutely love that people have been waiting for it, but it is a massive undertaking in the middle of the week. The back-to-back podcasts, both prep and recording-wise, it's a tall task. So I'm glad people appreciate it and love it.
One of these days, we'll have to peel back the curtain a little bit on the process that goes into us recording podcasts on Wednesdays and Thursdays. A little bit more in depth than obviously Monday, where we can recap what we saw. But anyone who thinks we're just able to do this rolling out of bed, throw a couple mics and get things rolling, not quite the case. And as like you said, Payne, we appreciate all the listeners who know the hard work that goes into it. We try and do everything we can to deep dive the games, and pretty excited about the slate of football games we have to break down today. Also, a tremendous interview on tap with John Sheeran. Interested to get his take on exactly what the rash of favorites covering last weekend meant to the folks at the FanDuel Sportsbook. But Payne, before we get into breaking down the games, and we'll do that in just a matter of seconds, we had another contest winner, and it's a familiar name atop the leaderboard.
Yeah, John Cohn. I believe that's how you pronounce the last name. Again, every week it's going to take a 5-0, so there's no reason to repeat that, but it's all about that Monday Night Football tiebreaker. So I know a lot of people typically put in their pools, and then the tiebreaker on Monday night's an afterthought, or they're just simply going to their odds screen and typing in the same total that the odds makers are using. You really need to be calculated with the Bet the Board contest pool each and every week on what you use as your tiebreaker, right? If you have a gauge of the game, you typically want to either be really high or really low, so you have that chance to win the tiebreaker. And John Coney did just that, went really high on the total. It cashed in for him, so congrats to him. The other thing, Todd, that we are still running because my mind is just so lost, so we will have to do this again on Monday. Remind me about this.
I'm making a note. Note.
We had the 300 contest giveaway, all different directions. We did the Thursday night game. We also did the iTunes contest. We still owe 3 winners of the iTunes contest $100 each. So go to iTunes, leave a 5-star review, leave a nice little comment there. Your name will automatically be entered into this automator. We'll pick 3 people, $100 each to those. We'll announce that on Monday. I've just been so busy and swamped with football season, and then obviously the college podcast on Wednesday. Completely forgot. Remind me. Monday we'll announce those.
You got it. We will do that. We'll make sure all those folks that have been so gracious enough to enter those 5-star reviews will be properly rewarded for their due diligence. So we'll get to that on Monday when we recap everything we saw on Sunday. But before we can recap those games, Payne, we have to see those games get played. And we'll kick things off in New England, where the Patriots welcome in the Las Vegas Raiders. You're looking at the Patriots, a 6.5-point favorite at FanDuel. Total in this game, 48. And when you look at New England over the years, this has been a franchise that's made its money on the heels of defeat, having won 77% of the time and covering the spread 69% of the time after a loss going back to 2013. Before everyone out there goes, yeah, that was with Tom Brady, pump the brakes. Yes, we understand that, but Bill Belichick and the coaching staff is still very much in place. They've also won 83...
Tom Brady was the quarterback of the New England Patriots?
You could do better than that. You want to try again? The Patriots have won 83% of the time and covered the spread 66% of the time at home in the role of favorites since 2015. Both are best marks in the National Football League. And when you look at the Raiders on the other side, started 2-0 for just the second time in the last 18 seasons. The other instance came in 2017. Payne, what was the primary takeaway you had from the Raiders and their Monday night win against the New Orleans Saints?
The Saints didn't look very good.
We're going to get to them later.
That was my takeaway. Listen, listen, when you're talking about the Raiders, it's got to be about the offense. I don't think we should be surprised that the Raiders offense looks good right now. If I recall, and we go back, the day John Gruden was signed to that big 10-year deal, we said, as long as he sticks to offense and doesn't put his hands on too many other things, the relationship can go pretty well. So I like what I saw from the Raiders offensively. I don't know if that's where we want to start for this matchup against New England, but you lead the ship, kind sir.
Yeah, we may as well. I think that's a good spot and an avenue to try and go down because for me, I don't want to be confused by the fact that the Raiders scored 34 points in the 10-point win against the Saints. When you consider that the offense averaged less than 5 yards per play, they were able to sustain drives going 10 of 17 on third down. They dominated time of possession. And when you look at Derek Carr, pretty good numbers on the surface, 282 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, but it felt like 97% of those yards went to Darren Waller. And as we know, when you take on the New England Patriots, they're going to eliminate what you do best on offense. And I guess the $100 million question, if you're New England and you're trying to devise a defensive game plan, are you taking away Waller in the passing game or are you selling out to stop the run and eliminate Josh Jacobs?
A little of both, I think. Right? And it's up to John Gruden to figure out the game plan that's going to bode well for his offense. And I'm not sure. Listen, we know what John Gruden is. He's an offensive genius. I would label him that. Few guys put in as much time, energy, and effort coming up with game plans. It's paid off. Right now, if you look at Oakland, and I know the yards per play numbers weren't great on Monday night, but in totality over the first 2 weeks of the season, they're number 2 in overall success rate. So they're moving the chains. They're staying ahead of the down and distance. They've been pretty balanced, top 6 through the air and on the ground in success rate. Derek Carr has been pinpoint accurate aside from the deep miss to Ruggs early on in that game. But overall, Carr is 5th in completion percentage above expectation, completing 7% more passes than he's been expected to. So he's been pretty good there. But again, it's been a little bit of dink and dunk still for Carr. We want to see him be a little better airing it out deep down the field. But I'm kind of nervous when I look at this game plan that Gruden and Carr continue the same style that they've employed the first 2 weeks, and they try that against New England. I don't think it will bode as well. Las Vegas has been oddly run heavy for the year 2020, I guess. 56% run on early downs. I don't think that kind of predictability typically works well against a Belichick defense. The other thing we know, Richie Incognito placed on IR. Trent Brown missed Monday night. He's battling 2 calf issues. So I don't know if he plays. So with those 2 guys out, I don't know if you can employ that same ground and pound style and be successful against New England. The game plan we discussed last week for Seattle was to attack New England through the air. Don't be scared by that perception of their vaunted secondary. And through 2 weeks, New England's 21st in defensive pass efficiency. I'm going to be candid here, Todd. When you look at Devontae Parker and Preston Williams and DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, those are better options than anyone the Raiders have outside right now. Ruggs has the tools to be great, but this is going to be his 3rd game as a rookie receiver in a shortened offseason where he's learning a new system. He's also dealing with a little bit of a knee issue at the same time. I think Belichick is going to be smart enough to take Darren Waller away. And if you look, kind of, the staple of the defense is to remove the tight end and the short passes. We know how successful it's been for New England's offense. Belichick realizes what it can do to a defense. So through 2 weeks, New England's only given up 4 catches and 39 yards to tight ends. You also look at this. Like, the Raiders are coming off this emotional game Monday night. Derek Carr's signing the wall. The first time last season, Gruden and Carr, traveled to a true East Coast game. They lost by 31 to the Jets. I'm just not sure this sets up well for the Raiders here.
Well, and to add another log to the fire, when you look at the comments from Mr. McCourty, and he basically came out and said, hey, look, I think for me, I know I have to go out there and I have to play better. And I know for us as a whole, as a secondary, we feel like we need to go out there and we need to play better. We've played better in the past. We have to pick it up, and we have to do a better job when Sunday comes. You have to imagine New England still stinging from the 5 touchdown passes they allowed to Russell Wilson, that they're going to be fully engaged, especially in that defensive backfield. If they can bring pressure, it'll make things interesting for Derek Carr. Will give Carr credit. He was under duress early in the game, getting sacked, I feel like 3 times on the first 2 drives. And in the past, he's normally cratered under that kind of duress, but at the same time was able to rebound. However, on the other side,
caused
Payne,
a little bit of that himself.
Yeah, I mean, if you sit in the pocket and hold on to the
didn't.
ball for 32 minutes, I mean, that's inevitably going to happen.
Yeah, he missed a wide open receiver on that one where he was just tapping the ball in the pocket and ultimately got crushed. But you're spot on. He didn't crumble under the pressure. Typically, he tends to do that a touch.
And when we look at things on the other side of the ball, the Patriots have now run the football in more than half of their offensive plays, 4th highest rate in the NFL, at a shade more than 50%. You know, Cam beginning to find his swagger wearing Patriot colors. When you look at what he accounted for in the loss against the Seahawks, 444 total yards from what they did. 397 passing yards versus Seattle were the 3rd most in any game of his entire career. And then when you look at his rushing numbers, the most rushing attempts at 26 and rushing touchdowns 4 of any quarterback this season, 2nd in rushing yards. Now, New England's offense obviously runs a heck of a lot better when you have a dynamic receiver in the backfield in James White. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the family tragedy he's dealing with. But you'd hope he'd be back in the fold from a betting perspective, giving the Patriots another weapon when they look to attack this Raiders team.
So 2 things. The first is the Sunday night numbers was ridiculous. That Cam accounted for 97% of the Patriots' total offense.
Oh, insane. Insane of what he had to do.
And the second thing is, with the run rate, it's a little skewed, right? We're the guys who pound the table, pass. But designed runs are wildly efficient, and I think it's a good idea to kind of separate the two from the actual run rate to versus what the designed runs are, because I think it skews the overall run numbers. And let's not have this confused, right? Runs into the line of scrimmage with a running back on first down, not ideal. Design runs with Cam, wildly efficient. So there is a little difference there. So I don't mind the increased run rate. One thing that when you look at Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels, it seems like they're having fun. You know, they're trying to prove to people that they can do it again. You know, paint this perfect picture. And it's just with wildly different brushes and paint. So I like what I have seen from them. Cam Newton, what he's doing right now in the position he's being put in, everything's been ideal. A lot of pre-snap motion, 2nd highest usage rate of motion in week 1 from the Patriots, top 10 rate in week 2. Cam's using his legs on these designed runs, 26 attempts in 2 games. Play action rate, through the roof. 44% of Cam's pass attempts have come off play action. That's the 2nd highest rate in the league. We saw different game plans, right? Week 1 to week 2, which shouldn't shock us because we know that's how good Belichick and these guys are. They just don't do what they're good at, but they do what's best based on the defense they're going to face. So week 1, we saw Cam get the ball out of his hands real quick. Took 2.3 seconds to release it against Miami, and it made sense as I watched the game unfold, right? Belichick's just smarter than everyone. If the Patriots are going to run Cam 14 times, they can't also have him get hit as a passer. There's only so many blows that Cam can absorb. So I think that's really smart. But all of a sudden, you know, when you look at Cam in the second game, to no surprise, the plan changes a little bit. They're going to start hunting some big plays against the Seattle defense that can't get pressure in the safety struggle and coverage. So Cam holds on to the ball for nearly 3 seconds, and then he finishes 5th highest in completed air yards week 2. So just wildly different game plans. The one thing that's fun is I heard this offseason that Belichick and McDaniels were basically living in the facility, trying to come up with this, new concepts, new ideas. They're basically building a brand new offense. Whatever they're doing, it's working. And you mentioned some of those early down runs. If you look at New England right now, why they've been so successful as an offense, they're bypassing 3rd down at the 2nd highest clip in the NFL. So they're getting a first down on 1st and 2nd down a ton. when you look at the matchup, I think just, again, a tough ask for Las Vegas after that emotional win late Monday night. You're traveling across the country for an early start. And the Patriots offense couldn't be more different than New Orleans, right? Like, I just think it really bodes well here. The Raiders' defense also hasn't been good. 30th in overall defensive efficiency, equally poor against the run and pass. When you start to geek out and you dig into some of the formations, New England uses 11 and 21 personnel most of the time through the first 2 weeks. Again, short sample size. Defensively, the Raiders have given up a 57% success rate against 11, 67% success rate against 21. It's been the two worst formations they've defended so far this year. So it just, again, the two formations the Patriots offense use the most are the two formations the Raiders have trouble defending the most. I think Cam and New England's offense keeps rolling. Two things to monitor, and you mentioned this at the top. One is center David Andrews hasn't practiced yet with a hand injury. We certainly want the center to be in there. He played through the hand injury this past week, didn't miss a snap. Hopefully that bodes well. James White still hasn't returned to the practice facility, but you kind of mentioned you thought he might be back. That would be obviously huge because if you look at the Raiders, giving up 16 receptions to running backs in 2 weeks on
just feed Burkhead. Just feed Burkhead, worst case scenario.
Yeah, Burkhead's a little bit different. But again, you're looking at this. The Raiders have given up 16 receptions to running backs in 2 weeks on 18 targets for 177 yards. James White would probably have a field day against that defense. Hopefully he returns.
Yeah, pretty sure Alvin Kamara is still running, albeit in a loss, but had quite the day, both running and receiving against the Raiders defense. And you talk about how much time Cam had in the pocket to pick apart the Seahawks secondary. Well, the Raiders not exactly synonymous with bringing pressure either, as Cleveland Farrell continues to disappoint in his sophomore campaign. Arden Key actually provided the most pressure off the edge for the Raiders. We'll see how that ultimately travels to New England. We'll stay in the AFC East, though, as it's the Buffalo Bills welcoming in the Los Angeles Rams. You're looking at this number right now, 2.5 at FanDuel. Buffalo, of course, a home favorite. Total in the game, 47 painted across the board. And Payne, when you look at the Rams, this is a team that'll be crisscrossing the country. I'll let you kind of fill in some of the gaps on that. After back-to-back trips in the Eastern time zone. But the Rams continue to be a road warrior under head coach Sean McVay. 12-6 straight up, 12-6 against the spread the last 18 games away from home. And when you look at the last 8 they've played in the Eastern time zone, well, Sean McVay has exceeded odds makers' expectations in 7 out of those 8 games. And I guess the biggest questions that we'll get to in breaking this one down, in terms of evaluating the Bills, how great a read can we have on this team, knowing that their 2 wins have come against the Miami Dolphins and the New York Jets, 2 sides that don't exactly boast a guy like Aaron Donald up front or a player like Jalen Ramsey in the secondary to try and neutralize their offseason acquisition of Stephon Diggs?
So let's touch on the travel first. But COVID effectively crushed the travel plans for the Rams. Now, it's not like they were in Philadelphia, and then they figured out, hey, we got to go home now. But at the beginning of the season, once they got their schedule, they sent in a request to the league to have the East Coast trip back-to-back weeks so they could stay on the East Coast. But once the league mandated that, aside from practice, you had to be held captive in your hotel rooms, McVay altered those plans last week and said, hey, we're going to fly back home. We're going to have our players sleep in their own beds, live a little bit freer throughout the course of the week. So, one, there is some value in this because, there's a reason he requested to stay on the East Coast back-to-back weeks. So going from coast to coast twice in 14 days is difficult. I know they're going to travel the day before the game, so Saturday they're going to travel back to the East Coast. I think it is important to note this. Now, is it going to change the game dramatically? No, but it is probably worth a half point here.
One thing I will say when you look at this game, and it's always interesting because we talk about it from a handicapping perspective, when you go from being the hunter to the hunted. This will mark the first time under Sean McDermott where the Bills will be favored in a game when playing against the team with a winning record. The last 19 previous games where they've been favorites have all been against teams with a losing record. You have to go all the way back to week 16, 2016 to find a time where the Bills were favored over what I guess you would call a good team with a winning record. Josh Allen obviously has made tremendous strides. This is all about confidence for him. And when you look at the numbers he's putting forth, his 729 yards passing lead the league. Stephon Diggs, back-to-back 8-catch outings, 239 yards receiving, are tied with Atlanta's Calvin Ridley for the NFL lead. You clearly see Cole Beasley and John Brown becoming beneficiaries as well. And while the Rams have been good defensively, Payne, limiting big plays and bringing the heat because we know what Aaron Donald can do we think Josh Allen can replicate some of what we saw last week against Miami and do that against a much better, more athletic Rams defense?
It's crazy to say this, and we absolutely love Sean McDermott, but when you're talking about the Bills right now, it's about this side of the ball. It's about their offense, and it starts with Josh Allen, and really, I think coordinator Brian Daboll. It's really a similar story and mirror image of what McVay is doing for Goff. You just look at a lot of these numbers, high rates of motion, a slew of play action passing, and helping, Josh Allen out by having him throw on first down. That's been the biggest change year over year. Buffalo's throwing on first down at a 63% clip. The first 2 years, Josh Allen only threw on first down 48%. Brian Daboll figured out what a lot of other coaches haven't, right? Hiding your quarterback on first down and then having him throw on third and long in known situations isn't helpful. You actually hide your quarterback by having him throw on first down. And it's helped this offense dramatically. I think Brian Daboll still realizes that as well as Josh Allen has played, he still does have some accuracy limitations. So let's throw on first down when, defenses have to defend both run and pass rather than, having him throw in these known passing situations. When you look at Josh Allen, he's still only 2% above expectation in terms of accuracy, as good as he's been. But what's staggering to see is when you look at Josh Allen throwing at, a 40% clip of play action, all of his yards seem to be coming off that as well. So to me, this is really about Brian Daboll. 12.4 yards per pass attempt on play action, just 6.6 yards without it. Everything Brian Daboll is doing for Josh Allen has been fantastic. He's encouraging him to hunt the deep ball now that you have Stephon Diggs. 56% of Josh Allen's passing yards have come off play action. If you're looking, the Bills lead the NFL in explosive passes with 12. Stunning. Diggs right now responsible for 38% of the Bills' air yards, even though, as you alluded to, Beasley's done well, John Brown's done well. Now that less attention's being paid to them, I want to see if Jalen Ramsey shadows Diggs this week, because if you can shut that well off, so to speak, it could hinder some things for Josh Allen. And Jalen Ramsey has shown that he's been willing to shadow guys. If you remember when Sean McVay and the Rams acquired him, they played Atlanta the very first game, and he went out there and shadowed Julio Jones, right? Very first game in the system. No worries. Let me handle this, coach. And throughout last year, whether it was Allen Robinson or DK Metcalf, he shadows all these guys. So that will be interesting. If he shadows Diggs and shuts him down, it's now on Beasley and Brown. Two more things that stick out, Todd, before I kick it back to you and keep us moving here. Which interior line wins the battle on this side of the ball? The Bills have been horrible running it, 29th in rush efficiency. They've struggled running right behind center Mitch Morse, actually just a 38% success rate on runs behind the center. But this is going to shock you. As well as Aaron Donald has been doing getting after the quarterback, through 2 games, runs right up the middle against the Rams where Aaron Donald lines up. Opponents have a 77% rushing success rate. So when you look at the Rams overall, 31st, allowing 66% of runs to great successful the first 2 weeks. So who wins that battle? Who kind of rises to the occasion and outperforms the poor, 2-week data sample so far? Final thing, the Bills have trotted out 3 wide receiver sets, 69% of their offensive snaps. The Rams are allowing a 51% passing success rate, defending 3 wide receiver sets. That's 3% below league average. You expect a lot of 11 right now with Brian Daboll steering this Bills offensive ship.
Well, I was going to say, kind of building on some of the points you made there, when you look at the Rams, they've been pretty good through that secondary preventing the big play. They've only allowed 4 passing plays of 20-plus yards all season. I know there are plenty of Cowboy fans who feel pass interference should have been called against Michael Gallup week 1, which may change the narrative a little bit. I had no idea that the Rams had been so bad against the run that the metrics bear out. Can tell you, watching with my own eyes for the better part of 3 quarters, Miles Sanders found it significantly easier than I anticipated. Running between the tackles there. But Brian Daboll probably had the best quote leading up to this game of any I've read all week. We just hope that Aaron Donald misses the bus, and it's going to give our offense the best chance for success. So having a little bit of fun there.
Mitch Morse, get it together at center.
Knowing exactly what that's going to take. But when you begin to look at things on the other side of the ball, the Rams have now run the football on 56% of their plays, the highest rate in the National Football League so far. Last season, Payne, they ran the ball on just 38% of their offensive snaps, the 7th lowest rate in the league. And when you look at this Bills defense, they've only faced 37 rushing attempts against them all season long. A lot of that dictated and necessitated by game flow, where they took a big lead early against the Jets and played from the catbird seat for extended stretches against the Dolphins. But I do think the Rams have to be cautiously optimistic about what they saw unfold last week, and that was more or less the emergence of Darrell Henderson, a guy that we were high of out of Memphis. He had 120-plus all-purpose yards and a touchdown in the wake of the injuries to Cam Akers and Malcolm Brown. He only had 12 carries for 81 yards, and of course, the lion's share came on 1 carry in that particular game. But all of a sudden, if the Rams have a ground game and Jared Goff can operate off of play action, we're talking about a Rams team more reminiscent of the one that got to the Super Bowl than one that floundered for large stretches last year.
Absolutely. And just when you think about that out loud, what it can mean for a team, especially moving forward in the salary cap era, if you can get the same or better production from a running back as opposed to Todd Gurley and not pay him as well, spend that money on other positions. So it becomes really, really impactful, I think, long-term if the Rams can find a running back or 2 to at least be as efficient. And if it's more efficient than Todd Gurley had been last year, it's an added bonus. Now, when I look at this offense overall, I said it after week 1. I think I mentioned it on the Monday recap show, and I'm going to say it again right now. Sean McVay's mojo is back, baby. Like, he is... I don't know what happened to him. It's been fantastic. He's lifted the Rams offense up single-handedly. He has crushed Mike Nolan and Jim Schwartz in consecutive weeks. All the things that help and assist an offense, McVay is doing. Week 1, McVay used the most motion at the snap, the second highest rate in week 2. Through 2 games, McVay used motion at the snap 15% more than in 2019. I was reading an article the other day. He kind of credited Baltimore for this. He was amazed at how much motion they used and said, I got to implement this a little bit more this season. So stealing in the NFL does work. The window dressing.
Just ask the New England Patriots. It's helped win them multiple Super Bowls over the last 10-plus years.
Shots. Shots. The window dressing is creating a lot of advantages for McVay's skill guys. And you hit this right on the head, how Goff performs with play action. And right now, McVay has Goff passing with play action at a league-high 48% of his attempts through 2 weeks. Highest rate in the league, by far, not close. That's also a 15% increase year over year with usage of play action. I'm telling you, McVay has called probably 2 of the better games in his career. He's on absolute fire right now. I think that's probably the key again this week. Right? We're keeping a close eye on the linebacker injuries for Buffalo, something I believe we made mention of last week. Tremaine Edmonds, Matt Milano, both guys missed the Miami game. Both practiced Wednesday, but in real limited fashion. If those guys miss again, it could be a little bit of trouble because pre-snap motion, play action, it affects linebackers dramatically. And if you have backups in that, aren't eye disciplined and the recovery rate after a few, false steps, probably not nearly as good as Edmonds or Milano. So that's something that you're going to want to monitor, the injury situation to the Bills linebackers. The other matchup advantage the Rams might have here, and again, 2-week sample size of data, but the Rams could have real success running the ball. And while you don't need to run the ball to set up play action, it can assist a little bit in that. And we know, Buffalo's defense, as good as it was last season, they finished 22nd in defensive rush efficiency. First 2 games this season, it's still a problem. You can see Buffalo getting off They've been getting blown off the ball a little bit when you look at some of the film. 21st in adjusted line yards defensively. It's translated into opponents being successful in 62% of their runs so far. Ed Oliver hasn't practiced yet this week, so that situation could be a little worse if he doesn't play. And you're looking at the Rams' run game. The offensive line, they have shown out so far. As a unit, the Rams are 7th in run blocking win rate. It's translated again. 59% of the Rams' runs have graded successful. That just seems like a little bit of an advantage. So if the Rams are able to run and you get the motion and all the pre-snap junk that McVay has been doing and the Bills linebackers are out, could bode well again for the Rams offense this week.
I'm writing this down now. Although I can't participate in FanDuel DFS, that I should be starting Tyler Higbee and Darrell Henderson as a Rams stack in my lineup to try and take advantage of some of those matchups that may work in their favor against Buffalo. From the early slate to the late slate, Payne, it'll take us out to the Pacific Northwest, where it's the Seattle Seahawks welcoming in the Dallas Cowboys. You're looking at Seattle, a 5-point favorite at FanDuel. Total now out to 56, as this number has leaked out throughout the better part of the week. The 73 points scored in the first 2 weeks is the second highest total for the Seahawks to start a season in franchise history. Russell Wilson became only the third player in the Super Bowl era to have 9 or more touchdown passes and 1 or 0 interceptions the first 2 weeks of the season. I do want it noted that one interception should have an asterisk by it, as it went right through Greg Olson's hands. The other 2 players who've achieved such a distinction: Patrick Mahomes back in 2018, pretty sure you've heard that name before, and Peyton Manning back in 2013. Lo and behold, both of those players went on to win the MVP award. When you look at this Seattle offense, they've shown...
You're just throwing shots at everybody today. Wily old veteran Greg Olson.
The ball hit him right in the hands. It literally hit him right in the hands. And I'm not the only one throwing shots, because I believe that was the only time he was targeted in the entire game on Sunday night.
I agree. It's tough watching him get old.
So, the one good thing for Greg in the silver lining is that he is going to be an outstanding analyst when he goes to the booth. I was actually surprised he went back to play this year, but figured maybe he wanted one more trip around the sun as a member of the Seahawks, given what he'd been endured with all the injuries and everything else in Carolina, knowing there was transition coming in Charlotte.
Absolutely. Go out on his own terms, possibly win a ring.
Hey, you do what you can. The window is way too short for a lot of these players in the National Football League, so you play as long as you can, and you make sure your body's at least 75% intact when you hang it up. When you look at this Seattle offense, and I think this is the most logical place to start given what Russell Wilson has done, matched up against the Cowboys defense, it's clearly reeling. The injuries continue to mount. You lose yet another cornerback to IR. How does Dallas even begin to formulate a game plan to slow down what's looked like one of the most explosive, efficient, and balanced offensive attacks so far through the early going in the NFL?
Probably not going to be able to. And again, not saying something that other people can't see just looking at the odds screen. Right? Totals at 56 and a half some places. And, whether it was Pete Carroll and Brian Schottenheimer, whether they just, crumbled to the media pressure, or they gave in to the constant badgering by Russ, or they just, finally woke up and realized that their team identity needs to be an offensive one after looking at, the parts they have on defense. It was a combination of all three, but Seattle's finally passing the ball more, and they're using Russell Wilson. I would actually like to see even more passing. But year over year, Seattle's throwing it on early downs 5% more, so that's a good start. It's working. When Russell Wilson is thrown on first or second down, Seattle number 1 in the NFL in passing success rate at 69%. So throw on early downs. Keep it going. If you look right now, Schottenheimer's offense is bypassing third down at the highest clip in the NFL. Seattle's picked up a first down on first or second down 64% of the time. So I think Brian Schottenheimer should crank up early down passing even more against the Cowboys. Metrically speaking, Dallas has had trouble defending early down passes. Whether offenses are throwing from 11 or in heavy sets like 12, Dallas has allowed a 112 passer rating on first down and second down combined from 3 wide receiver sets, 124 passer rating from 2 tight end sets on first and second down. You look at the injury report. You hit this perfectly. They're missing more faces. Chidobe Awuzie is out a few weeks. Anthony Brown was placed on IR before the Atlanta game. Trevon Diggs, he missed practice on Wednesday. They like Diggs so much, it's the reason they let go of HaHa Clinton Dix. We know Byron Jones left in free agency. This was going to be a patchwork secondary to begin with. Now the injury bugs hit. The Cowboys have given up 10 explosive passes so far, most in the league. And to this point, Dallas's defensive line has had trouble getting to the quarterback. So it's magnified the issues in the secondary even more. I think the question mark coming into the year, who's going to help, supply the pass rush? Basically, it's DeMarcus Lawrence and nobody else. So teams are doubling him, chipping him. He left the Atlanta game early, hasn't practiced yet this week. As a whole, Dallas 26th in pass rush win rate, 25th in adjusted sack rate. I don't see how Seattle doesn't score early and often here. It's all about the Cowboys offense trying to keep up.
Yeah, you mentioned the Cowboys. They've amassed a grand total of just 2 sacks through the first 2 games. But rest assured, Cowboy fans, Everson Griffin came out this week and said he intends to go back to a 3-point stance instead of playing upright the way he's been playing through the first 2 games. So suddenly he may start to look like Lawrence Taylor in his prime out there applying pressure. But Cowboys fans also, all is not lost. An interesting historical note here when you consider the magnitude of their comeback last week. Over the last decade, teams have actually gone 14-7-1 straight up, with a point per game differential of plus 6.9 in the game directly following a 20-point comeback victory. So it flies in the face of what you would normally think is logic, that inevitably a letdown is in store when you have to exert that kind of emotion. Apparently some of that carries through to the next game. But like you said, if the Cowboys are going to be successful, it's going to be because their offense is able to match the Seahawks score for score. And Dallas right now boasts the number 2 total offense in the NFL behind only the Packers. Dak Prescott, 700 plus passing yards through 2 games, 3rd in the NFL. And when you look at Dak, he's set to face a Seahawks defense that ranks last in the NFL in both total yards per game allowed and passing yards allowed per game. Matt Ryan and Cam Newton went absolutely bonkers. And obviously, the variety of weapons the Cowboys can throw at you will leave a lot of defensive coordinators with sleepless nights. But I think, Payne, for all the success we believe Dallas is going to have, it starts with the building blocks on that offensive line. Any updates on the health and status of some of those key cogs?
Not 100% certain at this point. I think La'el Collins went to IR, so he wouldn't be able to come back until the earliest after week 3. Tyron Smith practiced off to the side yesterday. So hopefully he's back out there. That would bode well. I think offensively, you have to keep up with Seattle. And if you're devising a game plan to attack the Seahawks, it seems pretty simple. And it's throw the ball. Again, data is limited, right? But we have eyes, and we can gauge personnel. We can match those things with the limited data that we have, and you want to make the most informed decisions possible. When you do that, the Seahawks have been pretty stout stopping the run, top 6 in adjusted line yards, rushing success rate, defensive rush efficiency. So that's been pretty good. But the opposite can be said about the Seattle Seahawks secondary, how they've defended the pass. 29th in defensive pass efficiency, bottom 3rd in the league in both explosive pass defense and passing success rate defense. Seattle lacks a pass rush. And I know they're above average and through 2 weeks in pass rush win rate, but it hasn't generated to actual pressures or adjusted sack rate. So this was an area that we thought was going to be an issue coming in. You also look at what Ken Norton Jr. is doing to manufacture some pressure. So he's blitzing right now at the 5th highest clip. He's sending guys like Bobby Wagner and Jamal Adams as blitzers. Those seem to be the 2 guys of choice that he likes to send out there. The problem is when you're looking at Seattle, 24th in adjusted sack rate. So they're sending the heat. They're not getting home. It's leaving the secondary even more exposed. I think Dak and the Cowboys offense has success moving it through the air. When you dig into some of the deeper level matchups, we know Mike McCarthy and the Cowboys love to run 3 wide sets. That didn't, seem to be a mystery. Once you drafted CeeDee Lamb, you pair him with Amari and Gallup. This is going to be their preferred grouping throughout the entire season. And now that they've been down, obviously, they use it a bunch. 84% of their snaps have been 3 wide sets, most in the NFL. Seattle hasn't defended that type of grouping very well. They've allowed a 55% success rate. They've given up 8.9 yards per pass attempt against 3 wide sets. I just think Dallas has success here. I really do. But we do have to keep an eye on the Tyron Smith injury. We also, when we look at some of these injuries, we also have to gauge their impact based upon the team they're playing. So obviously you'd love to have Tyron Smith out there. He's one of the best left tackles in all of football. Again, worked off to the side on Wednesday. Let's see if he's a little more involved later today or on Friday. But again, when you're looking at Seattle, and it's a team that doesn't apply pressure very well, the loss of Tyron Smith, if he doesn't go, isn't as impactful as if the Dallas Cowboys were playing a team that has this vaunted pass rush or a great end. That's not the case with Seattle right now.
And one thing to Seattle's defensive credit, I probably didn't speak strongly enough about how porous this secondary has been in the grand scheme of things. The 831 yards the Seahawks have allowed through the first 2 games is the second highest total by any team through the first 2 weeks of the season, according to the Pro Football Reference database. So just to kind of put things in perspective. And when you talk, Payne, about the injuries impacting Dallas offensively, a couple for Seattle that you're going to want to keep tabs on as well. We know Marquise Blair and Bruce Irvin were both sent to IR, so you're going to see Jordan Brooks, a talented linebacker out of Texas Tech, make his starting debut, and Pete Carroll pretty mums in terms of what exact linebacking position he'll play. And then we should see Ugo Amadi out there starting at nickel corner, which I think only helps strengthen the case for Dallas's ability to score damn near every time they have the football.
2 other things here. You mentioned the Bruce Irvin ACL injury, but Jerron Reed and Benson Mayowa missed practice on Wednesday. And so if you don't have your starting interior lineman or your starting end, could spell even more trouble, especially if Tyron Smith returns.
Should be an interesting game for sure. Leading us into the nightcap, where the Green Bay Packers and that white-hot Aaron Rodgers-led offense will be on full display down in the Big Easy, taking on the New Orleans Saints. And you're looking at the Saints, a 3-point favorite at FanDuel. Total in this game, 52.5. And some of the good before we get to the bad, the Saints have shown amazing resiliency coming off of a loss in recent years, going 8-0 straight up and 6-2 against the number after their last 8 losses. They've actually been dominant as favorites of less than 4 points, compiling a record of 7-2 straight up, 7-2 against the spread in those particular spots. And when you look at the Saints, Payne, yes, their offense didn't perform to their normally high standards, but they've got to shore up some of the hidden yardage that's really had a negative impact on them so far this season. The Saints have allowed 248 penalty yards through the first 2 games. 150 of those have come on defensive pass interference. In comes Aaron Rodgers, the Green Bay Packers offense. Fool or folly that we should be buying into what we've seen from Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones, and Devontae Adams through the first 2 games?
A little both. And I would actually have skewed on the side of folly. But during quarantine, Rodgers apparently got a little bored like the rest of us. So he went back and watched some tape of himself from the 2010 Super Bowl season, and he claims he immediately noticed something he was doing, and he wanted to fix it. And as soon as camp opened, Rodgers started implementing whatever fix it was in camp, and he's been humming ever since. He obviously hasn't divulged what it is, but it seems to be working, whether it was mechanics or something he noticed he was doing that might have been a tell to the defenses. Whatever it is, Aaron Rodgers right now is humming. He seems in a good place. The other element here, and it's a touch narrative-based, but clearly it means something to Rodgers or he wouldn't have said it publicly. And it just came down yesterday, Todd. He publicly supported Dak, discussing the mental health issues. And whether we feel it's throwing someone under the bus or not, Rodgers specifically led into saying that he's in a better headspace after breaking up with Danica Patrick. I feel like the line from Rounders here is fitting. What is it in the poker game
I don't
of
think.
life?
We may hold on. We may have some female listeners. I'm not sure you want to deliver that particular line.
It's from the movie. It's doable here. It applies. We love female listeners. Keep tuning in.
Keep in mind, though, it did get Mike Milbury fired from his analyst job at NBC Sports Network during the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Did it really?
Yeah, that was part of what contributed to it. So tread lightly in that regard.
This is a quote from Aaron Rodgers himself directly yesterday. Better headspace.
No, there's no doubt about it that sometimes when you alleviate yourself of that emotional baggage, it allows you to focus on the task at hand.
Very possible. Have you ever been yelled at for splattering toothpaste on the bathroom mirror?
Yes. as a kid and in relationships past and present. And
these are the things Aaron Rodgers is not dealing with right now, and he's chucking it all over the park because of it.
Yeah, and he's definitely looked good in doing so. There's no doubt about it. I think it's fascinating when you talk about the note as it pertains to him doing some introspection, self-studying, and figuring out where he was deteriorating from a mechanics standpoint. No doubt about it. And Payne, I guess when we look at this Green Bay offense, I think the biggest question coming in, and we're both, I imagine, optimistic he's going to play, but Devontae Adams held out of practice yesterday, precautionary or otherwise. You think he's going to be a full go dealing with the hamstring injury on Sunday night?
I don't see an issue there. Apparently he wanted back in the game, but the score didn't indicate that he needed to be back out there, but it is a nagging hamstring issue. A lot of these soft tissue injuries have been rolling around the league, so you want to monitor that, but I think he's all go. Now, to your initial question, I do think it's probably impossible to sustain this rate of offense. Like, they're on pace for 8,000 yards, Todd. And, Aaron Rodgers has graded out the best quarterback the first 2 weeks, and whether it's on the ground or through the air, Green Bay's offensive line, top 2 in both pass blocking and run blocking win rate, which is a little surprising, right? They lost Brian Bulaga in the offseason. They thought that could be a little bit of an issue. Aaron Jones has been fantastic, 25% more valuable than an average running back right now. And you put it all together, and I'm not huge for some of these history trends, but the Packers, they're the only team other than the 1991 Buffalo Bills that have had at least 85 points and 1,000 or more total yards the first 2 games of a season. So offense is humming right now. Rodgers is doing 2 things. He's pushing the ball downfield. We've seen his ADOT improve a little bit. 5th highest average intended air yards when throwing. He's also been extremely accurate, completing passes 6% better than expectation. It's led right now to the Packers offense being number 1 in EPA. I think we have to give some credit to Matt LaFleur as well. He's been pretty diverse in his formations. Maybe he's heard people talking. There's been a lot of balance, right, between using 11 and 12 and 21 personnel. He's keeping defenses on their heels. Now, I do want to see what it looks like. Sunday night against the Saints defense and Dennis Allen. Green Bay has faced, and this is where some of the hesitation comes from your initial question, they faced 2 bottom feeders, both riddled with defensive injuries. You get Detroit, who's 24th in defensive pass efficiency. They were without 3 guys in their secondary last week. Minnesota, who's injured defensively, breaking in all new cornerbacks week 1. So that's who they've faced so far. The rankings probably look a little worse, too. If Scantling doesn't flat drop the touchdown pass in week 1 against the Vikings, if T.Y. Hilton doesn't drop a bomb from Rivers in week 2. So the Viking secondary right now, even though it shows 19th in defensive pass efficiency, I think it's much worse. I think Green Bay's faced probably 2 of the worst secondaries right now in football. The other thing that's interesting here, even though the Saints got torched by the tight end over and over and over again on Monday night, which I heard screwed you out of a fantasy trade.
I don't want to talk about it, dick.
You had a DJ Chark for Darren Waller trade lined
don't
up. And then
want to talk about it, Payne.
The Saints are actually a top 10 defense overall against the pass in terms of efficiency through 2 weeks. So a little bit of a tougher test here. By the way, you're making me feel bad. I feel like we need to redo the entire breakdown here between Aaron Rodgers quotes and now this through fantasy football. I feel like a bad guy. I'm really not.
Yeah, somehow I think we'll be able to persevere through. I'm not too worried about our show getting canceled or you trying to cancel me out here because of a fantasy trade that I wasn't able to execute. Instead, allowing Chris Herndon to be my black hole at the position. We cast him aside, bring in Dalton Schultz, the great white hype, to try and patrol the middle of the field and bring me back to respectability after an 0-2 start. You mentioned the Saints defense, and clearly this is a unit that's going to provide a much stiffer challenge than what Green Bay's encountered. I want to get to home field and what you think it means in a game of this magnitude, but let's get to the other side of the ball first before we do that. And look at Drew Brees and this New Orleans offense. Drew Brees in his career, 22-6 at home in prime time as a member of the Saints, 78 touchdowns, 16 interceptions. Not a characteristically great stat line for him in Monday night when he was 26-38, 312 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. But other than Alvin Kamara, I mean, are there weapons that he can consistently rely on? We did see Traquan Smith show flashes. Emmanuel Sanders, I don't think any of us expect him to be a bona fide number one, and Jarrett Cook, in my opinion, has to play a bigger role, but that doesn't get to be that much easier if Andrews Pete, one of their key cogs on the offensive line, remains questionable for Sunday night's game.
So I'm not panicking yet, but it hasn't looked good for Drew Brees.
But
I understand Michael Thomas is out, so there are some elements surrounding Drew that aren't ideal. Right now, Brees' completion percentage is 8.5% below expectation. His average intended air yards are the lowest of any quarterback in football. He's only thrown deep 4% of the time. And even when Brees has been completely clean in the pocket with no rushers barreling down his throat, he's not been his usual self. 17th in adjusted completion percentage without pressure. So it scares me a little bit that the one thing that hasn't left him at age 41 was his accuracy. There's now some questions there as well. I think he does have a chance to make it right against this Packers defense. This should be a matchup where he and the Saints have success. I think New Orleans should be able to move the ball on the ground. They should be able to have some balance. Now, it's 2020, so there is a caveat with the word balance. It doesn't necessarily need to be a 50-50 run-pass split. But being able to do both is the definition of balance in 2020. The Packers right now, 30th in defensive rush efficiency. They're dead last in rushing success rate defense. Green Bay's allowed 67% of runs to great successful. Kenny Clark, the Packers' big man up front, he was out against Detroit, hasn't practiced yet this week. Going to have to monitor that. We know the Smith brothers, they've been great creating, pressure and getting after the quarterback since they arrived in Green Bay. But they've done a really poor job setting the edge. Outside zone runs have crushed the Packers. I think we're going to see a lot of those run types. I really do. It's something that we mentioned last year in the San Francisco game. It's something we mentioned on the preview podcast from breaking down the Packers defense. They struggle with the outside zone runs, and it's because the Smith brothers are coming up the field after the quarterback. They're really not setting the edge overly well. Look out for that. The other thing, when Brees does throw, he should have success over the middle, right? Find Kamara, find Cook, as you alluded to there. He's got to have a big role in this game. 20 times in 2 games, opponents have targeted tight ends or running backs against Green Bay. 17 times those targets were caught. Last season, under the same defensive coordinator, Mike Pettin, Packers defense allowed a 106 passer rating on throws in the 0 to 14-yard range over the middle. Far and away the worst rating allowed by the Packers defense to any sector of the field. So Brees has got to wear out the middle, right? Find Kamara in there, find Cook. Maybe Emmanuel Sanders is running drags and crossing routes over the middle. That's really where you want to attack this Green Bay defense.
Last but not least on this game, and I feel it's a question I'm going to have to ask not only today, but also subsequent weeks going forward until we wrap our head around everything that the new NFL ultimately has to deal with no fans in attendance. How much of an adjustment should we be making knowing what the Superdome typically provides for the Saints in a game of this magnitude off a loss and an electric atmosphere, that you're not going to have that noise working in their favor in terms of what kind of advantages it can give their opponent, especially a veteran quarterback in Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, we covered this a little bit on some of the preview podcasts when we were talking specifically about teams like Minnesota and the Saints. I think we touched on it week 1. So, it's a sliding scale for us. Home field advantage is never the same each and every single week. I think it's dependent upon opponent as well. If you are doing home field advantage correctly, the one thing that we've kind of talked about is the decibel level. The NFL was going to play it by ear on how many decibels of noise they would allow pumped into stadiums. We're still at 70. Kind of divulged, speaking with other coaches, they were practicing leading up to the season at 85, so 70 really isn't a big deal. I can say this, Aaron Rodgers has commented that his cadence has been more impactful, specifically speaking about week 1 in a dome in Minnesota without as many fans and crowd noise limited. He said it appeared to him that defensive linemen weren't quite getting off the line as fast because typically with the increased noise, they can't hear cadence and they're really just going on the ball. Now that defenders along the line can hear cadence, at least for 1 week, and remember, this is Minnesota, who he's referencing, didn't have Everson Griffin, lost Danielle Hunter, lost Linval Joseph, Michael Pierce, who they signed along the defensive line, didn't play, so he's going up against some backups. But in terms of week 1, he felt like the defensive line guys weren't getting off the ball as quickly due to them being able to hear his cadence.
Going to be an interesting football game for sure. We'll see if the Packers can keep their unblemished record.
Way to get a really, really valuable nugget out of me there. Good job.
Every now and again, I got to try and pull some stuff from you. Just because you don't want to be forthcoming and you want to take shots at me, every now and again, I'm going to call you out and see what kind of information we can weasel out of you to our listeners.
You were making fun of an old guy like Greg Olsen.
Oh, here we go. Yes, says the guy who's ready to send Drew Brees to the glue factory, so pipe down over there. You can follow Payne on Twitter at Payne Insider. I'm Todd
Furman. This is a big week for Drew. Big week for Drew.
You can follow me there as well. Most importantly, follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod, and you should also follow our first guest on this week's show. After a tremendous maiden voyage here on the Bet the Board podcast last week, we weren't sure if John was going to jump back into the fold and talk a little risk management, liabilities, and all that good stuff. But we're pleased to welcome in John Sheeran, the head of FanDuel Sportsbook. And of course, you can follow John on Twitter at JSheeran. That's JSheeran 1981 on Twitter. John, thrilled to have you back with us. But I have to imagine last weekend was not a banner one for the house and trading team.
Thanks for having me back, guys. Yeah, look, it is what it is, right? The favorites went 14-2, and we expect to lose when that happens, and that's exactly what happened. We weren't disappointed. It could have been an awful lot worse, though, Todd. The Chiefs not covering was really an excellent result, as was Monday night, and that gave us some respite. From my perspective, it's a good outcome early in the season. A lot of our parlay customers having, extra funds in their wallets, and I'm sure they'll be back with a vengeance this weekend. So we'll survive another week, put it that way.
Well, and you mentioned Monday night. Wanted to follow up on that real quick because I know out here in the desert, a lot of books said regardless of how that game played out, it wasn't going to be the best case scenario. With a little bit of local bias, the Raiders playing their first ever home game as Las Vegas's team. So there was a lot of money line liability. You mentioned favorite and the banner weekend. If the Saints had won, would it have shifted the balance that much more negatively against the house? Won and covered, I should say.
I think it probably would have doubled our losses last weekend, which were significant. It would have been well into the double figures in millions. The other result, though, the Chiefs one, was a really important one for us to get right, Todd. We were lucky we didn't really have that big of a liability on the Raiders. We don't really see a lot of some of the West Coast team support that you guys will in Las Vegas. Here, obviously, we're predominantly on the East Coast, so we kind of avoid those, and we're kind of cheering on the likes of the Niners and the Raiders most often,
John, let me ask you this before we get to the Week 3 action. You mentioned that the players are going to have their accounts flush. Do you typically see when that happens an influx of action the following weekend?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it happened in 2018. I think we went into week 6 winning double-digit hold percentage, and we came out of week 9, I think, negative cumulative. So what happens is you get this, not alone do you get the winners who come back and reinvest, but you also get the guys who missed out. And all their friends are telling them about the win that they had, and they're showing them their parlays, and you see them on social media. So you kind of get this halo effect of all of the new customers actually trying to win what their friends won. So we'll see increased liabilities this weekend, no doubt.
Makes sense. And with that, what kind of big decisions are brewing right now? Is there anything that's completely lopsided that you're going to have to worry about a little bit come Sunday?
Yeah, I think the kind of 2 biggest ones so far, and I said we don't get any Niners money, it seems to be that everyone wants to fade the Jets, and that's been a good strategy through 2 weeks, and may well be for a lot of the season given how they look. But we've seen a ton of action for the Niners. About 93% of the money in that game has been for them. And the other one I would say has been is very obvious in the Colts as well. at 10.5. There's obviously a ton of action for them as well. Not as big a buy. I spent 75% of the money for the Colts at 10.5. We opened that, I think, 6.5 or 7 a couple of weeks ago when we put it up. So that's been a pretty heavy move there.
You know, Payne, who knew that New Yorkers love to abandon ship faster than fans in any other sports? I mean, with all the money coming in on the 49ers, despite the fact that people probably can't name San Francisco's starting quarterback, the myriad of injuries they have on the defensive line, still obviously betting them with reckless abandon. John, I can only imagine if the Eagles start to tank and put forth efforts like we saw last Sunday, I mean, you're going to have 3 full-blown fades between Philadelphia and the 2 New York, New Jersey teams.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Eagles have been not unlucky because it's been bad play, particularly a quarterback. But you know, I don't know if their performances have been as bad as they look in the results sheet. So I'll reserve judgment on them yet and see how we go. But yeah, I mean, the Jets in particular was one that everybody got off very quickly. I said it at the start of the season. We didn't see the outright money that we would normally see for both the Giants and the Jets. People were still a little bit up on the Giants, but they had already deserted the Colts or the Jets. So I think you're in a position until we see a change in coaching at the Jets. That'll continue to be the trend, I think.
You know, Payne, you mentioned it on our season preview podcast, and John, I'm curious to get your take. One of the big things for this season, given the unusual nature with no training camps, Payne had trying to drummed into the heads of a lot of our loyal listeners. Hey, you don't want to overreact to what you see with 1 or 2 games, but you also don't want to underreact because things will be able to snowball pretty quickly. Have you guys seen yourselves changing the overall power profile and rating for the Jets, given just 2 games and how poorly they've performed so far?
Yeah, look, it's the old adage of how quickly you actually make those changes and how quickly you kind of decide that it's no longer noise. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. And one of the things we would always challenge the guys on is, you know, not overreacting, but at the same time jumping on, you know, systematic changes in either teams or offenses. Or we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago around the Seahawks, for example, in week 1, where they had that change in philosophy in the offense, passing and letting Russ go a little bit more. We said that if we saw it again against what they may have perceived to be a much better secondary in New England in week 2, that we would actually re-rate the Seahawks quite aggressively. And we've done that when we saw what they did against New England, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. So we're now 13-1 from 18-1, which was a pretty big change. But we think that kind of core change in Seattle warranted it, and it wasn't just noise in the first 2 weeks. And similarly with the Jets, I think people still having them, you know, 8th or 9th worst team in the league is probably misleading, and I'd be more aggressive in shoving them downwards than I would some of the other teams below them, you know.
You know, Payne, being the consummate professional you are, I feel it's only right that you get to ask John about any professional positions he's seeing this weekend.
It's early. We know that. But have you seen any big action come in from the pros at this point?
I think not necessarily big action. I think there was a couple of really interesting ones from a customer that we would really, really respect. One of them is against what our numbers told us, but it was for the Rams. We felt that line was more like the Bills -3. So we would ideally want to kind of push it out a little bit more, but we're respecting that customer's bet. He's been pretty accurate so far in his betting experience with us. So that's one that we're kind of a little bit unsure of. Without that bet, we definitely would have been more aggressive in offering a bigger number on the Rams. But that kind of information from that bet gives us enough to think maybe we're not exactly right. And then the other one was an over. Let me just dig out which game it was. Can't find it now, typically.
You know, Payne, it's interesting. While John looks for that total stuff to talk about the Rams, obviously a game that our listeners know we were on the wrong side of last weekend, despite the move towards Philadelphia, and trying to figure out what this team is going to be, given the fact that under the expanded playoff format, the Rams would have been a postseason team last year. They overachieved at the betting window and seemed to be one of the teams flying under the radar, at least the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Sean McVay's been fantastic. We talked about that a little bit earlier in the show. I think the only thing that makes this game a touch interesting is the Rams were projected to stay on the East Coast, and due to COVID decided to travel back home because they were going to be locked in the hotel rooms when they weren't practicing. And McVay said, hey, screw that. We're going to go back home. We're going to live a little freer. and we're going to have people sleep in their own bed. So that could change the dynamic a little bit this week. I know that information didn't come out until about Tuesday, and I envision John seeing that action come in on the Rams possibly on Monday.
Yeah, I mean, look, we had it down as a negative for them traveling across the country 2 weeks in a row is obviously pretty challenging. Obviously some offensive line injury concerns as well for the Rams, and we know what Goff has been like under pressure. And then kind of the uptick for us in Allen in terms of the scheme that they've devised there. Obviously, Diggs has helped massively. I think Allen's expected completion rate percentage is up almost 8% on last year, albeit off just 2 games. But they seem to have done a really good job coaching, and it's actually a really good coaching matchup. I'm excited to kind of watch that game and kind of see how it falls. So, yeah, it's an interesting one, but I would respect the money. I did get the other one, guys. The total in the Niners-Giants game was the other one. We were 40.5, and we moved it to 41.5 off that. But for any of your listeners that can grab anything around 41, I would suggest that's probably one of the sharper bets that we've seen so far this week.
It's awfully interesting when you try and figure out, which side will benefit more. San Francisco losing all key contributors defensively, or the Giants, of course, being down Saquon. I'm sure a lot of our listeners going, we don't know where the points are going to come from. So that'll help them quite a bit, John. And we'd also be remiss if we let you go before we hit on the biggest game of the weekend. That, of course, the crown jewel in the AFC on Monday night. And we saw Baltimore open a much shorter favorite than currently where the number sits at FanDuel. 1.5 out in that 3.5 range. Have you guys seen professionals taking a position on the Ravens against the defending Super Bowl champs?
No, I think most of our move was really down to our re-ratings and such. I think some of the injuries on defense for Kansas are a concern for us. The way the Baltimore have been moving the ball has been really impressive. Obviously, sharing the carries out among 3 backs and obviously the quarterbacks. So that's been interesting. We just think that they're in a better spot. It looks a good spot for Baltimore, obviously a key game in relation to the number 1 seed. So I don't see it moving an awful lot more from where it is at 3.5, but I doubt we would want to go back to 3. It looks like a good matchup and a good timing for Baltimore. They've been really consistent, and obviously Kansas have been, lacking a bit of the explosive plays, but maybe that's more to do with the zone defense that they faced in weeks 1 and 2. And obviously we know with Baltimore's increased level of skill, they're more likely to go man to man. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of matchup works out. But for us, Baltimore deserving of being a 3.5 point favorite right now anyway.
Should be another great weekend of NFL action, John. We can only hope for your health, safety, and sanity that we get one dog of more than 4.5 points to win outright on Sunday to help offset some of that liability. Can't thank you enough for your time again this week. Look forward to chatting this time next week. And encourage all of you, our loyal listeners, to follow John on Twitter at Sheeran. That's JSheeran1981. Some of the best information you're going to find throughout the course of the week and on game day. John, best of luck this weekend, my friend.
Cheers, guys. Appreciate it.
Man, there is no sympathy listening to John Payne when it comes to how New York and New Jersey sports fans feel about their football teams after just 2 weeks of the season. They're ready, it sounds like, to completely throw in the towel on the Jets and Giants.
Absolutely. And the Eagles fans don't sound like they're too far behind, although they are pretty loyal. And I think there is light at the end of the tunnel for the Eagles. I really do. And I think John made mention of that according to their power numbers, they don't think the Eagles are as bad as perception, which is bang on accurate with what we are seeing on our end.
It may be a fair way to look at it. I can tell you the betting market doesn't quite agree with that assessment this week. As you see Philadelphia bet down from a 6.5 point favorite at FanDuel now to 4.5. Not a game that we'll deep dive in any great detail. From a team who's been disappointing, though, in the Philadelphia Eagles, at least through 2 weeks, to a team who's kind of been a pleasant surprise in the form of the Jacksonville Jaguars in Thursday Night Football. The Jags 3-point favorites at FanDuel as they welcome in the Miami Dolphins. Total in this game has been bet up all week long. We'll call it 49 right now as we're recording. And when you look at the Jaguars, for all their futility, interestingly enough, this team is still 6-4 straight up, 8-2 against the number the last 10 games they've played during the month of September. When you look at the last 4 Thursday Night Football games, they've all gone over the total, averaging nearly 60 points per contest, going over by an average of 13 points per game. And Payne, when you look at your Dolphins, going back to 2010, a robust 5-14-1 against the spread record in prime time. That does include all days of the week. The second worst mark in the league behind only the Houston Texans. But let's start with this Jaguars offense.
See, your shots are a little more disguised to the naked ear.
Well,
but you're making me relive what I already know. And it's full of disappointment when it comes to the Dolphins.
Somewhere along the way, what is it? Ken O'Brien's walking through that door to lead a Herculean comeback, or was it Dan Marino? I can't remember exactly how that football game went.
We just need your brethren back at quarterback. I was a big Jay Fiedler guy. He was awesome.
You need that. Maybe you need a little more Sage Rosenfels in your life. Somewhere along the way, all things lead back.
What the heck is Sage doing with his life these days? I heard he's causing noise on the old social media.
Yeah, every now and again I see one of his tweets pop up and I have to mute the guy. Not like I follow him, but that's always a ringing endorsement of how I feel about somebody's content when I have to mute them when I don't follow you. When you look at the Jags, they're off to their best 2-game start on the offense.
You are a funny guy. I don't think you know this. And you don't mean to be. But sometimes...
No, it's not intentional. It's more people laughing at me than with me.
No, and I think that's why it is so funny, because I don't expect it from you.
The bulk of the time. The Jaguars are off to their best 2-game start on the offensive side of the ball in nearly 2 decades, scoring a combined 57 points against their division rivals, Indianapolis and Tennessee. 5, Payne. It's the number of times the Jacksonville Jaguars have punted in the first 2 games. Why is that number notable? Because it's considerable progress for a team that punted at least 4 times in the first half of 9 games in 2019. Is it time to buy stock in Minshew Mania? Because the mustache ride might cost a heck of a lot more if this team moves to 2-1.
So, I think you provided Jacksonville bulletin board material. You only gave me 2 minutes to discuss them on the preview podcast. You didn't think they were worthy. I blew through the wall and went 3.5 minutes, and you shunned me for it. You still are to today. I think you were the reason Jacksonville has had such ATS success so far.
Well, hey, the last time I took shots, and one of my quotes was immortalized in a poster in a team locker room. It was with the Texas A&M football team about 4 or 5 years ago when I called them the most overrated team in all of college football. They, however, could not handle that particular burden and the weight of pressure I heaped on their shoulders, because I think they lost 5 out of their final 6 games and went 0-6 against the number.
I actually managed to, and you don't know this, at auction, I bought that dartboard they had at you in the locker room. I planned on giving it to you as a housewarming gift.
It's very thoughtful and beautiful. I'll have plenty of space in my office that's now still barren in terms of white walls.
So let's talk about the number a little bit. I think it's certainly a different ball game when you go from covering spreads as a touchdown plus underdog to now being required to win the game outright and cover by more than a key number here. I think it's a little bit of a tall task. But right now, you mentioned Minshew. He's dealing 3rd in the NFL in completion percentage above expectation. James Robinson has been a pleasant surprise through 2 games, 16% more valuable than an average running back. They wanted to get him involved, so they didn't keep Leonard Fournette around, and so far, again, limited sample size, it's paid some dividends. It just feels like the Jaguars have zero pressure right now. They're playing with house money. That fits their quarterback style a little bit, playing loose and free. They have another gettable defense tonight. And as much money as the Dolphins spent on defense this offseason, it hasn't helped. Dead last in defensive efficiency. They've been horrific against both the run and pass. But the one thing that Jacksonville is dealing with a little bit tonight, their starting center, Brandon Linder's out. Their kicker, Josh Lambo, is out. But again, I just think this is a little bit tougher of an ask for the Jaguars tonight. When you need to win the game outright, do it by more than the key number of 3. Totally different ask of them on a short week than it is, having zero expectations and covering spreads that are greater than a touchdown.
To kind of put into context some of what Minshew's been able to do so far this season, he's got more passing yards, 512, than Lamar Jackson. More touchdown passes, 6, than Patrick Mahomes, and a higher completion percentage, as you mentioned, than just about everybody in the league right now. And I do have to give the Jags some credit. We'll see how this experiment ultimately bears out. They made a conscious effort this entire offseason to part ways with anyone that could potentially impede Minshew's progress and development. I don't think he's going to be the franchise quarterback going forward. You have to imagine they're going to try and get one of the highly acclaimed college prospects, but it's still interesting nonetheless if you raise his trade value and figure out a team that might be interested in it. We've seen Laviska Shenault in his rookie campaign get involved in a variety of ways, both running the football and as a receiver. Keelan Cole, touchdown catches in 3 straight games, as we know Dede Westbrook expected to miss, and DJ Chark, as you said before we jumped on air, trending in the right direction. On the other side of the ball, we look at Ryan Fitzmagic, who threw for 300 yards and 2 scores last game. There hasn't really been much ground and pound from the Dolphins offseason acquisitions in Jordan Howard and Matt Breida. Myles Gaskin probably should be getting a bigger amount of the carries than he is. Thankfully for the Dolphins, though, the Jacksonville Jaguars haven't been able to bring pressure. If Ryan Tannehill could sit there and carve them up, you have to imagine Ryan Fitzpatrick should have plenty of success against this Jags D.
We're still trying to figure out the mystery, right? And one thing that Brian Flores has always said, if you practice well, you're going to play. And apparently that's what's going on with Myles Gaskin. It's why he started the season getting the heavy workload that he's got. He was just more impressive than Howard and Breida in the short camp. You mentioned the lack of pressure that the Jaguars can bring. You're dead right. Bottom 6th in team pass rush win rate. The Dolphins offense got on track a little more in week 2, and that was a good sign against, pretty tough Buffalo defense. Not a defense that we think as highly of this year when they're injured as I think probably perception. Which if you look at the Dolphins, they were successful in 53% of their total plays in week 2, more than the Buffalo Bills actually. I thought it could take some time, for the rest of the guys to get familiar with Chan Gailey's system in this shortened offseason. We know Fitzpatrick's familiar with it, playing in Chan's system for 5 years with Buffalo and the Jets, but everyone else still adjusting. I think, week 3, we're trending towards a spot where the offense probably is in a little bit better shape than it was in week 1, certainly. If you look at Fitzpatrick, I know he had the 3 interception game the opening week, but I think he's been pretty solid overall. Accuracy's been pretty good, 3% above expectation in completion percentage. In the area where Miami likes to attack is in the middle of the field. It's an area where Jacksonville's defense hasn't been tested yet. Jacksonville's defense has only seen 17 passes to the middle of the field in all areas, whether it's short, intermediate, and deep. 14 of those have been completed. Expect the Dolphins to kind of wear that area of the defense out. I think the other interesting thing here, and it will shock some people, the change in system with Chan Gailey has also resulted in increased pace. And I know people will be like, well, they've been playing from behind. But one thing you're always going to want to look at with pace is look at it in the first half, because it's less about adjusting to the scoreboard and more about your game plan. Miami has the 6th fastest pace in the first half. I would expect that to continue here. Not saying anything, again, that the odds screen does not, but this did open 44 on Sunday night, but I would say once the limits started to rise a little bit, 45 was more of the true consensus number. We're now out to 49. The skies look clear, as you alluded to, Todd. DJ Chark trending in the right direction. I couldn't go over here at 49 now, but extreme professional money from multiple groups on the over here in this one.
A game that I think when a lot of us looked at the schedule, we didn't have real high expectations, thought it could be a 17-13 clunker, but all of a sudden a lot more intrigue, especially for the fantasy player, to get their Jaguars and Dolphins active and kick things off in style on Thursday night. So hopefully we get a little bit of track meet football for some entertainment value, even if that total ship has long since sailed from the opener. A great show that we've put together for all of you, our loyal listeners today. I want to thank John Sheeran for joining us. But Payne, before we can officially close up shop on this fine Thursday, we do have one other area or issue to address, and it's a question of where we're going for our best bet this NFL Week 3.
I know it's one that we talked about before the show, so we both like this one. We broke the game down. It was the initial one, Raiders at Patriots. There's just a lot of things here that favor the Patriots, not just in the matchups and on the field, but I think there are a couple elements outside off the field that certainly bode well for the Patriots here. Let's go ahead and lay the 6. I have a feeling that this potentially closes 7 on game day. I really believe that. So let's get out ahead of that. We saw what our best bet did yesterday to the market in the college ranks. So we want to get out ahead, bet the Patriots as soon as you listen to this, lay the 6. I do think it has a real shot here to close 7 on game day.
Look at us, 2020, a true formative year. We're laying nearly a touchdown in the National Football League. I think a lot of our listeners never thought they'd live to see this particular day.
They'd feel much better if I chose a route that was uncommon to our typical bet the board path. There was 2 games that we debated last week. It was the Eagles and it was the Packers total. And even though it was the second number we could have given out, I had a feeling it was going to close much higher. But I don't think we've ever given out an NFL over.
No, maybe full game. I think you're right.
Ever. I think people would have made sure they were listening to the right podcast. So I didn't really want to send them into a shock week 2.
It's a very good point. There was an over we actually discussed for today's podcast too, but that number not available. So we'll hope the sides are kind to us for NFL Week 3. Again, special thanks to John, who joined us every Thursday throughout the fall. Excellent content. Follow Payne on Twitter at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Furman. You can follow me there and follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. If you haven't listened to the Week 1 or whatever the hell we're calling it, college football podcast, encourage you to check that out as well. Payne, any final words of wisdom, parting shots, things you'd like to get off your chest before you get a 72-hour plus sabbatical from dealing with me?
I love women.
Oh, God. On that note, I'm not going to let you talk anymore. All right. Special I got nothing. To all our loyal listeners, we appreciate your continued response. Go to iTunes, 5-star reviews, and come, what the hell is it, Sunday with a, what do we give?
I got you all out of sorts there.
Sunday with a New England Patriots ticket in hand. We'll see you.
Trying to redeem myself.
At the window. I don't know if redemption's possible.
Thanks for listening to Bet the Board. You can catch Todd and Payne every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday during football season, breaking down the biggest NFL and college football games. And to make sure you don't miss any free best bets, subscribe to Bet the Board on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.